Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's tale about a marriage that was never meant to be, yet slowly transformed into something real. A couple who started off as strangers bound by a contract, but somewhere along the way, things started to change. Can a contract built on lies and broken promises truly turn into love? Let's find out together. When Nathan Miller and Ella Harris entered into their marriage, neither of them expected it to be anything more than a simple business arrangement. They had both entered into this deal with clear boundaries, no emotions, no expectations, just a partnership. But slowly, ever so slowly, things began to change. Nathan found himself paying more attention to Ella than he had intended. At first, it was just a passing thought. The way she smiled when he made a sarcastic joke, the way she carried herself in a room full of people, elegant, confident, yet with an undeniable warmth. It was almost impossible to ignore. He told himself it didn't matter. It was just a passing phase, just a fleeting curiosity. But the more time he spent with her, the more he found himself looking for excuses to talk to her. Ella, too, began to notice Nathan in ways she hadn't before. The man who had always been aloof, so focused on his business, began to show her sides of himself she hadn't expected. There were moments when his tough exterior seemed to crack, when he was vulnerable in ways she hadn't anticipated. Ella didn't know how to react. She had come into this marriage knowing exactly what to expect, nothing. But now, she was starting to feel something. Something she hadn't planned for. Something that didn't fit into the neat little box she had put their relationship into. It was a strange, confusing feeling. One minute, she'd find herself laughing at one of Nathan's dry comments, the next minute, she would wonder what it would be like to share something more with him. It was a dangerous thought, one that she quickly shoved to the back of her mind. She couldn't afford to get attached. She had a life planned out, a future set in stone. Nathan was just a means to an end, wasn't he? That's what she had promised herself. But life has a funny way of throwing curveballs. The more time Nathan and Ella spent together, the more their bond deepened. At first, it was subtle, a touch of the hand in passing, a shared laugh over dinner, an inside joke that no one else understood. But over time, those small moments added up, becoming something more than either of them could ignore. For Nathan, this new reality was both thrilling and terrifying. He had never been the kind of man to let emotions get in the way of business. But Ella had somehow slipped past his defenses, and now he was questioning everything. Was this love? Or was it just some strange byproduct of their situation? He didn't know. What he did know was that it was real, and it was something he couldn't easily dismiss. Ella, too, felt the shift. She could feel the change in Nathan's gaze, the way he looked at her now, differently. It wasn't the cold, detached look he had given her at the start of their marriage. No, there was warmth there now. And it made her heart beat a little faster. But the more she felt, the more she pushed him away. It was safer that way. She could still go through the motions of being his wife without truly allowing herself to be his wife. The idea of letting herself fall for Nathan, to become emotionally invested, was terrifying. It was the one thing she could never afford. But no matter how hard she tried to push those feelings down, they refused to stay buried. And with each passing day, it became harder to deny the truth. Their marriage was no longer just a contract, it was something more. Something they both couldn't ignore anymore. Nathan had always believed that everything in life had a purpose. That each decision, each moment, could be mapped out with logic and reason. But now, he was beginning to realize that not everything could be controlled. Not everything could be planned. Ella was challenging everything he thought he knew about relationships, about love. And it scared him. He had spent so many years building walls around himself, around his heart. Now, it was as if Ella had found a way inside. And the more he tried to resist, the more he realized he didn't want to. Ella, on the other hand, was still stuck in her own struggle. She was beginning to question everything she had believed about herself, about her future. She had always seen this marriage as a stepping stone, a temporary arrangement that would eventually fade into the background of her life. But now, as Nathan's presence in her life grew stronger, she couldn't help but wonder if there was more to this marriage than she had ever imagined. Maybe there was more to Nathan, too. Maybe this wasn't just some temporary arrangement. Maybe there was a future here, one that didn't involve the cold, calculated path she had once mapped out for herself. But to even consider that was dangerous. The more she thought about it, the more she realized how much she had to lose. Her family, her reputation, her entire future had been built on the assumption that this marriage was nothing more than a contract. What would happen if she allowed herself to fall in love with Nathan? What would happen if she allowed herself to feel something real? As the days passed, the tension between them grew. Neither of them could deny the shift, the new dynamic that was developing between them. What had once been a business partnership, a cold, calculated arrangement, was now something more, something far more complicated. And neither Nathan nor Ella knew what to do about it. But one thing was certain, things were no longer as simple as they once were. And whatever happened next would change everything. As the days passed, Nathan and Ella continued their daily routines, but something had undeniably shifted between them. Nathan found it harder to focus on his work. His thoughts kept drifting back to Ella, her laugh, her smile, the way she seemed to genuinely care about the people around her. These were not the qualities he had expected from her. She wasn't just a pretty face in a contract anymore, she was becoming someone important to him. Ella, too, felt the change. It wasn't just Nathan's warmth that had started to affect her. It was the small gestures he had been making, holding open doors, listening to her thoughts without dismissing them, and offering a support she hadn't expected from someone in a business arrangement. She had thought he would be distant, unemotional, but there was something about him that seemed to draw her in, despite her best efforts to remain detached. But Ella's inner struggle was growing. She had spent so long building up walls to protect herself from the possibility of feeling too much. She knew exactly what was at stake. If she allowed herself to feel, to let her guard down, everything she had worked for could be jeopardized. Her family's approval, her social standing, and even her carefully planned future were all tied to the idea that her marriage to Nathan was just a temporary arrangement. But could she really ignore what was happening? Could she continue pretending that this marriage was only a business deal when she felt so much more? One evening, they sat together in the living room of their home, the soft glow of the fireplace casting shadows on the walls. Ella was reading through some documents when Nathan walked in. He had been unusually quiet all evening, and she could sense the weight of his thoughts. Without looking up, she said, "You've been quiet tonight. What's on your mind?" Nathan hesitated for a moment, his hand resting on the back of a chair. He hadn't meant to get to this point, but here he was, struggling with emotions he didn't know how to process. "I've been thinking," he said slowly, his voice softer than usual, "about us. About this marriage." Ella froze for a moment, her heart skipping a beat. She had known they were both going through something, but hearing Nathan speak about it out loud made it feel too real. "What about it?" she asked, keeping her voice steady, even though her mind was racing. Nathan took a deep breath before continuing. "At first, I thought this was just a deal. A business arrangement. But lately, I can't help but wonder if there's more to it. If maybe, I don't know, we're starting to feel something for each other." Ella's breath caught in her throat. She had felt it, too, the change, the growing connection, the shift from a cold partnership to something that now had weight. But hearing Nathan say it made it more tangible. "I don't know what to say," Ella admitted, her eyes not meeting his. "I never expected this. I thought we were clear about what this was, an arrangement. A way to get what we both needed. That's all." Nathan nodded, but there was a look in his eyes that told Ella he wasn't satisfied with that answer. "I know," he said softly. "But that was before. Things are different now, aren't they?" Ella didn't answer right away. She wasn't sure what to say. She didn't want to admit that she felt the same way. That the walls she had spent years building had started to crumble. That, despite herself, she was beginning to care for him. "This isn't supposed to happen," Ella said quietly, her voice tinged with frustration. "This wasn't part of the plan." Nathan took a step closer, his gaze never leaving hers. "Plans change," he said. "People change." The room seemed to grow quieter, the space between them filled with a tension neither of them could ignore. Ella knew he was right. She could feel the weight of his words in the air, in the way he was looking at her. But she wasn't ready to admit it. "Not yet. I can't do this," she whispered. "I can't fall for you." Nathan took another step closer, his voice barely above a whisper now. "You don't have to fall for me. But maybe we can find a way to make this work. Maybe there's a way we can do this, together." Ella's heart raced. She could feel the shift between them, the new, unspoken understanding. She could no longer deny the chemistry between them. But the fear was still there, the fear of what it would cost. She had to be careful. She had to be strong. "I don't know if I can," she said softly, her eyes finally meeting his. "I don't know if I'm ready for that." Nathan didn't say anything at first. He just stood there, looking at her, as if waiting for something. And then, finally, after what felt like an eternity, he said, "I'm not asking you to be ready. I'm just asking if you're willing to try." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with possibility. The tension was palpable. Ella felt her heart racing in her chest, torn between her fears and the undeniable pull she felt toward him. Could she really go against everything she had planned for her life? Could she take the risk of opening her heart, of letting him in? It was a question she didn't have an answer for yet. But as she looked at Nathan, she realized one thing, this wasn't just a business deal anymore. This was something real. And no matter how hard she tried to fight it, she wasn't sure she could walk away from it. The days that followed that conversation felt like a delicate balance for Nathan and Ella. Both of them were caught in a whirlwind of emotions, uncertain about what to do next. Nathan had always been a man of control, someone who prided himself on his ability to make rational decisions. Yet, here he was, unsure about what to do with the feelings that were growing inside him. Every glance, every word between him and Ella seemed to have more weight now. It wasn't just the marriage anymore, it was something more complex, more real. And that terrified him. Ella, too, felt the growing tension. She was conflicted, torn between her long-held belief that this was just a temporary arrangement and the undeniable attraction she now felt toward Nathan. Her heart raced every time he walked into the room, and her thoughts seemed to be consumed by him even when he wasn't around. It was something she hadn't planned for, something she couldn't control. But as much as she tried to push those feelings down, they kept rising to the surface. Despite their growing emotional connection, neither Nathan nor Ella was ready to admit the truth. The walls they had carefully built were still standing, but cracks were beginning to form. Each moment they spent together only made it harder to ignore what was happening between them. Still, they both tried to act as though everything was the same, sticking to their original plan. Nathan focused on his work, and Ella kept up appearances, playing the role of the perfect wife. But deep down, both of them knew they were no longer just playing a part. One evening, they attended a gala together, a grand event that Nathan had organized for one of his business ventures. The ballroom was filled with elegant people, the hum of conversations and clinking glasses creating a lively atmosphere. As they moved through the crowd, Nathan couldn't help but notice how different things felt now. Before, he would have been able to ignore Ella, to keep his emotions in check, but tonight, something was different. Every time their eyes met, there was an undeniable tension, a connection that neither of them could escape. Ella, too, felt the change. She was used to being the center of attention, to commanding the room, but tonight, it was different. She felt Nathan's gaze on her, felt his presence more intensely than ever before. As the night wore on, they found themselves standing alone on the balcony, the cool night air a stark contrast to the warmth of the crowded ballroom. Ella leaned against the railing, looking out over the city, trying to calm the rapid beating of her heart. Nathan stood beside her, quiet for a moment, before speaking. Ella, his voice trailed off, and for a moment, he seemed uncertain. It was unlike him to hesitate, but there was something in the air between them that made everything feel more complicated. Nathan, what is it? Ella turned to face him, her heart pounding in her chest. He hesitated again before finally speaking the words that had been building inside him for days. I don't know how to say this, but I can't keep pretending that this is just a business arrangement anymore. I care about you, Ella. More than I thought I would. Ella's breath caught in her throat. For a moment, she felt like the ground beneath her feet had shifted. She had known deep down that this was coming, but hearing Nathan admit it out loud made everything feel so real, so raw. I didn't want to feel this way, Nathan continued, his voice quieter now. I told myself I wouldn't. But it's happened, and I can't deny it anymore. Ella's eyes softened, and for the first time in a long while, she felt her walls begin to crumble. She had spent so much time convincing herself that this marriage was just a contract, that her feelings didn't matter. But standing here, with Nathan's words hanging in the air, she realized that everything had changed. I care about you too, Nathan, she whispered, her voice barely audible above the noise of the party behind them. The words came out before she even had time to stop herself. And just like that, the final wall she had built around her heart began to fall. Nathan reached for her hand, his touch gentle but firm. Are we really going to pretend that this isn't happening? He asked softly. Ella looked up at him, her heart racing. She didn't know what to say. She didn't know if she was ready to fully embrace this shift in their relationship. But one thing was clear, they were no longer just playing the parts they had signed up for. This wasn't just a marriage of convenience anymore. There was something real between them now, something that neither of them could ignore. I don't know what happens next, Ella admitted, her voice filled with uncertainty. But I can't deny how I feel. Nathan nodded, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that sent a shiver down her spine. I don't know either, he said softly. But maybe that's okay. Maybe we don't need to know everything right now. For a moment, they stood there in silence, the weight of their words lingering in the cool night air. Neither of them knew what the future held, but one thing was certain, their relationship was no longer the business arrangement they had agreed to. It was something more, something neither of them could have predicted. As they stood there, their hands intertwined, neither of them could deny that the journey they were on had just taken a dramatic turn. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear, they were no longer just two people bound by a contract. They were something more. And that was the beginning of a new chapter in their story. The following days were filled with an uneasy tension. Nathan and Ella had crossed a line, but neither of them knew what that line meant anymore. The more they tried to act as though nothing had changed, the more apparent it became that everything had. Their once business-like marriage was now a complex mix of emotions neither was prepared for. Nathan found himself thinking about Ella at all hours of the day. When he was at the office, he couldn't concentrate on work. When he was at home, he couldn't stop thinking about her smile, the way her eyes lit up when she laughed, and the warmth that seemed to radiate from her. He'd always prided himself on being a man of logic, of reason. But Ella had cracked that shell. And now, he wasn't sure who he was anymore. Ella, too, struggled with the change. She had spent so long convincing herself that this was nothing more than a contract, a marriage with no real feelings involved. She had even managed to convince herself that Nathan was just another part of her life's plan, a tool to secure her future. But now, she couldn't shake the way her heart raced when he touched her, when he looked at her with those intense, searching eyes. He had never been the man she thought he was, and she had never been the woman she thought she was, either. It was confusing, unsettling, and deeply vulnerable. The turning point came one night, when Nathan invited her to dinner at their favorite restaurant, a place they had frequented before their marriage. It was meant to be a casual dinner, just the two of them, like they had done so many times before. But the air between them was different now. As they sat across from each other, the usual easy conversation felt forced. Neither of them could ignore the tension in the air. Finally, after several moments of silence, Nathan set down his glass and looked at Ella, his expression serious. "Ella," he began, his voice quieter than usual, "I think we need to talk about what's happening between us. We can't keep pretending that nothing's changed." Ella's stomach dropped. She had been expecting this conversation, but hearing it out loud made her heart race. "I know," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been thinking about it too." Nathan's eyes searched hers, looking for an answer he wasn't sure he wanted to hear. "I don't know where this is going, but I do know that I can't ignore it anymore. I don't want to keep living in this limbo." Ella's heart pounded in her chest. She had spent so long protecting herself, but now it felt as if everything was crashing down around her. "What are you saying?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Nathan took a deep breath before answering. I'm saying that I can't keep going through the motions with you. I can't pretend that I'm just here to play the part of your husband. I care about you, Ella. And I think you care about me too. I'm not asking for everything, but I need to know if we can figure this out together. Ella felt a wave of emotions flood through her: relief, fear, excitement, confusion. For the first time in their marriage, she realized that Nathan wasn't just asking for her to go along with a plan. He was asking her to take a leap of faith, to let go of the walls she had spent years building. I don't know if I can, she whispered, the words escaping her before she could stop them. I've spent so much time convincing myself that this was all just a contract. That I couldn't feel anything for you. But now I don't know what's real anymore. Nathan reached across the table, taking her hand in his. The contact was electric, sending a shiver through Ella's body. Ella, he said softly, you don't have to have all the answers right now. I don't either. But I'm asking you to try. We don't have to know everything. We just need to know if we're willing to figure it out together. Ella's eyes welled up with tears. She had spent so long denying herself the right to feel, to care, but now, with Nathan's words hanging in the air between them, she felt like she was on the edge of something real. I'm scared, she admitted, her voice cracking. I'm scared of what this means. Of what it will cost me. Of losing everything I thought I had. Nathan squeezed her hand gently. I know you're scared. I am too. But we can't live in fear forever, Ella. We have to take a chance. Together. They sat in silence for a few moments, the weight of their conversation settling in. Ella could feel her walls crumbling, bit by bit. It wasn't easy. Letting someone in had never been easy for her. But with Nathan's steady presence beside her, she started to feel like maybe it was time to stop running from the truth. For the first time in a long while, she was beginning to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could figure this out together. The road ahead was uncertain, and the risks were real. But Ella knew that one thing was clear: their marriage, their relationship, had just taken a step into the unknown. And that was a step she was finally willing to take. As days turned into weeks, Nathan and Ella found themselves at a crossroads. They had reached a point where their feelings were undeniable, but the reality of their situation hung heavily between them. They had always known their marriage was based on a contract, an agreement to benefit both of them in ways that didn't involve love. But now, as their emotions deepened, they had to face the truth. They could no longer pretend that everything was business as usual. Nathan spent more time reflecting on their conversations, his mind often drifting to Ella's words, how she admitted her fear of letting go, her struggle to trust him, and how she feared the loss of everything she had worked so hard for. He understood. He had spent years building his empire, carefully crafting a life that was under his control, free of emotional messiness. But now, that control felt like a cage. Ella was no longer just a part of his life. She had become the center of his thoughts. Yet, he didn't know how to take the next step. He wasn't sure what would happen if they gave in to the feelings they had for each other. Would it ruin everything they had built? Or could it create something better? Ella, too, was struggling with the weight of their situation. She had spent her entire life being careful, calculating each move, controlling every aspect of her future. She had thought that marrying Nathan was just a means to an end, a safe way to secure her place in the world. But as she spent more time with him, she realized that her heart had started to change in ways she didn't expect. Every time Nathan looked at her, there was something different in his eyes, something that wasn't part of their original plan. It was confusing, it was scary, and it made her feel more vulnerable than she had ever felt before. But despite all the fear, there was a part of her that couldn't ignore the pull between them. She couldn't deny that something real had developed, something more than a business transaction. One night, as they sat together on the balcony of their home, Nathan reached out and touched her hand. The cool night air brushed against their skin, but Ella felt a warmth between them that had nothing to do with the temperature. "Ella," Nathan said quietly, his voice soft but steady. "I can't keep pretending that this is just a contract. I can't pretend that I don't care about you. This has gone beyond what I expected." Ella looked at him, her heart racing. She wanted to say something, to tell him that she felt the same way, but the words seemed to stick in her throat. "I don't know what to do with this," she whispered. "I don't know how to deal with how I feel." Nathan squeezed her hand gently, his expression sincere. "We don't have to have all the answers right now," he said. "We don't need to figure out everything tonight. But I need to know if you're willing to try. Are you willing to take the next step with me? To let this become something more than just a marriage on paper?" Ella's heart was pounding, her mind spinning with conflicting emotions. She had spent so long building walls around herself, convincing herself that she couldn't feel anything for him. But now, standing there with Nathan, she realized that those walls were crumbling, piece by piece. She had always been so afraid of what might happen if she let herself fall for him. But now, as she looked at him, she saw a man who was willing to take a leap with her, to be vulnerable in ways she had never expected. "I'm scared," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I don't know if I can trust this. I don't know if I can let go of everything I've worked for." Nathan didn't hesitate. "I know. I'm scared too. But maybe that's part of it. Maybe the fear is what makes this real. We can't control everything, Ella. We can't plan for every possible outcome. But what we can control is whether we choose to face it together. I'm asking you to take a chance with me. I'm asking you to believe that we can figure this out, that we can build something real, something that's ours." Ella stared at him, her emotions swirling inside her. She had always been so determined to keep everything under control, to keep her life orderly and predictable. But with Nathan, she felt like everything was shifting. He wasn't asking her to give up her life, her goals, or her future. He was asking her to let him into it, to see if they could build something together, something that was truly theirs. She didn't know if she was ready for that. But she knew one thing for sure, she couldn't keep pretending that nothing had changed. She couldn't keep ignoring the way her heart felt when she was with him. "Okay," she whispered, the word barely audible, but enough for Nathan to hear. "Okay, I'll try. I'll try to see where this can go." Nathan's face softened, his eyes filled with a mixture of relief and hope. He reached up and gently brushed a strand of hair away from her face, his touch tender. "Thank you," he said quietly, his voice filled with gratitude. "That's all I'm asking for. We don't have to have all the answers. But we'll figure this out together." As they stood there in the quiet of the night, their hands entwined, both of them knew that they were about to embark on a journey that was uncertain, yet full of potential. The future was still unknown, but for the first time, they were facing it as partners, willing to take on whatever challenges lay ahead, together. As the days passed, Nathan and Ella settled into a new, uncertain rhythm. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and that was something neither of them had expected when they first entered this marriage. The emotions that had once terrified them now felt like an inevitable part of their lives, woven into the fabric of their days together. For Nathan, it was still difficult to shake the old patterns of thinking. He was a man who had always controlled his world with precision, his business, his personal life, everything had been planned to the smallest detail. But Ella had changed that. She had shown him a side of himself he hadn't known existed, a side that felt, that connected. The reality of what they were building together, their connection, their vulnerability, was something he wasn't sure he had the strength to handle. But each day, it became harder to ignore the pull between them. Ella, too, was learning how to let go. The walls she had spent so many years building were slowly crumbling, piece by piece. With Nathan, she found herself opening up in ways she had never allowed herself to before. She was learning that not everything in life could be controlled, not even her feelings. As much as she had tried to push them down, they were there, stronger than ever. She had always told herself that this marriage was just a stepping stone, a way to secure her future. But now, she wasn't sure what that future looked like. Was it the one she had planned, or was it something entirely new? One evening, as the sun began to set and the city skyline lit up in the distance, Nathan took Ella out to dinner at a quiet, upscale restaurant. They had been through so much in such a short time, and Nathan felt that this moment, just the two of them, away from the pressures of their daily lives, was the right time to have another important conversation. As they sat across from each other, their eyes met, and Nathan could see the uncertainty in Ella's gaze. She had come a long way since that night on the balcony, but he could tell she was still scared. He understood. He had his own fears too. Ella, Nathan began, his voice softer than usual, I know this isn't easy. I know we've both been carrying a lot of weight. But I need to know where you stand. What do you want? Where do we go from here? Ella took a deep breath. This was the moment she had been dreading. She had spent so long avoiding this conversation, not wanting to face the reality of what they were becoming. But now, with Nathan's eyes on her, she knew she couldn't avoid it any longer. I don't know, she said, her voice shaky. I'm not sure what I want anymore. I've spent my whole life planning, controlling everything, and now I feel like I've lost that control. But when I'm with you, I feel something I haven't felt in a long time. I feel alive. Nathan's heart skipped a beat. He had known that they were both feeling this, but hearing it from Ella's lips made it real in a way he couldn't ignore. I feel the same way, he admitted quietly. I never expected this, never planned for it. But now that it's here, I don't want to run from it. Ella's eyes filled with emotion, and for a moment, she looked away, unsure of how to move forward. She had always been in control of her life, and now, for the first time, she felt like she was at the mercy of something she couldn't plan for. But I'm scared, Nathan, she whispered, the vulnerability in her voice undeniable. I'm scared of what this means, of what could happen if we let ourselves feel too much. Nathan reached across the table, gently taking her hand in his. I'm scared too, he said softly. But maybe that's part of it. Maybe it's the fear that makes it real. We don't have to have it all figured out, Ella. But I need you to know that I'm here, and I'm willing to take this journey with you, no matter where it leads. Ella squeezed his hand, the warmth of his touch grounding her, even as the fear still lingered in her chest. She had spent so long running from this moment, running from the truth of her feelings. But now, she realized that she didn't have to be afraid anymore. She didn't have to have all the answers. They could figure this out together. Okay, she said finally, her voice trembling but determined. I'll try. I'll try to see where this goes. Nathan's face softened, and a smile tugged at the corners of his lips. Thank you, he said quietly. That's all I'm asking for. As they sat there, their hands intertwined, both of them knew that their journey together wasn't going to be easy. But it was a journey they were both ready to take, one step at a time. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time, they were facing it together, no longer just a business arrangement, but something real. They didn't have all the answers, but they had each other. And maybe, that was enough. The weeks that followed were filled with a mixture of hope and hesitation. Nathan and Ella were no longer just going through the motions of a contract, they were beginning to build something more, something they never expected. But that didn't mean the path was easy. There were moments when doubt crept in, when both of them questioned if they were truly ready to embrace this new reality. Nathan found himself constantly thinking about Ella, wondering if he was doing the right thing. He had built an empire on logic, on control, and yet here he was, letting his heart lead him into uncharted territory. It was both thrilling and terrifying. But when he looked at Ella, when he saw the way she was beginning to trust him, it made everything feel worth it. Ella, too, was learning to embrace the uncertainty. She had always been a woman who planned every detail of her life, who controlled her future with an iron grip. But Nathan had shown her that sometimes, the most beautiful things in life weren't planned, they were discovered. As their connection grew, so did her fear. She had let her guard down, and for the first time in a long time, she felt vulnerable. But there was something about Nathan that made her feel safe, something in the way he looked at her that made her believe they could face anything together. One evening, after a particularly long week, Nathan invited Ella to spend the evening at their favorite spot, a quiet park near their home. It was a place they used to visit when their marriage was still a contract, a place where they would take walks and talk about everything and nothing. This time, however, the air between them was different. They no longer talked just to pass the time, they talked to understand each other, to build a deeper connection. As they walked beneath the canopy of trees, the soft rustling of leaves above them, Nathan took a deep breath and turned to Ella. I've been thinking, he said, his voice filled with quiet sincerity. About us. About where we're headed. Ella stopped walking and turned to face him. She had been thinking about it too, about how things had changed between them, how they had changed. I've been thinking about it too, she said, her voice steady, but her heart racing. This isn't what I expected. I thought we'd always just be two people in a marriage for convenience, two people who never let their emotions get in the way. Nathan nodded, taking her hand gently in his. I never thought I would be here, either. But now, I can't imagine going back to what we were. I don't want to. Ella's eyes softened, and for the first time in a long time, she felt the weight of everything she had been avoiding lift off her shoulders. I don't want to go back either, she admitted. But I'm scared. I don't know what happens next. I don't know if I'm ready to trust this. To trust you. Nathan squeezed her hand, his gaze never leaving hers. I'm not asking for you to have all the answers, Ella. I'm just asking you to trust me. Trust that we can figure this out together. Trust that we're not just two people bound by a contract anymore. We're something more. Ella looked at him, her heart pounding in her chest. She had spent so long keeping everything under control, keeping her emotions in check. But now, as she stood here with Nathan, she realized that she didn't need to have everything figured out. She didn't need to control every part of her future. They didn't have to know exactly what would happen next. All they needed to do was take it one step at a time. "Okay," she whispered, her voice barely audible but full of determination. "I'll trust you. I'll take that step with you." Nathan's expression softened, and for a moment, the world around them seemed to fade away. He reached up and gently brushed a strand of hair away from her face, his touch tender. "Thank you," he said quietly, his voice full of gratitude. "That's all I need. We don't have to know everything right now. We just have to trust each other and take that next step." The two of them stood there, hand in hand, surrounded by the quiet beauty of the night. The world felt still, but in that stillness, there was a sense of peace. They didn't have all the answers, but for the first time, they were no longer trapped in the uncertainty. They were facing the future together, not as two people bound by a contract, but as two people willing to explore the possibilities of what they could become. There was a long road ahead, and neither of them knew exactly where it would lead. But in that moment, with Nathan's hand in hers, Ella realized that it didn't matter. The journey was theirs to take, one step at a time. As the weeks turned into months, Nathan and Ella's relationship continued to evolve in ways neither of them had anticipated. They had started out as strangers bound by a contract, two people who had entered into a marriage with no expectations of love. But now, they were something more. They were partners, equals, facing life together. It wasn't always easy, and there were still moments of doubt, but with each passing day, they learned more about each other and themselves. Nathan found that his life, once dominated by control and logic, was now filled with emotions he didn't know how to navigate. But with Ella by his side, he learned to embrace those emotions, to let go of the need for constant control. He learned that sometimes the most important things in life couldn't be planned, and that love, true love, was not something that could be forced or manufactured. It had to happen naturally, at its own pace. Ella, too, had changed. She had spent her entire life guarding herself, keeping her emotions in check, building walls to protect her heart. But Nathan had shown her that it was okay to feel, that it was okay to let go of the need for control. She learned to trust, to let herself be vulnerable, and in doing so, she discovered a love she never expected. A love that felt real, that felt like home. There were still challenges ahead, still moments where doubt would creep in, but now they faced those challenges together. They no longer saw their marriage as a contract, as a business arrangement. It had become something deeper, something more meaningful. One afternoon, Nathan took Ella to the same quiet park where they had walked months before, when everything between them was still uncertain. This time, as they walked hand in hand beneath the trees, there was a sense of peace between them. They had come so far since that first night they admitted their feelings for each other. They had grown together, learning from each other, becoming more than they ever thought possible. "You know," Nathan said, breaking the comfortable silence, "I never thought we'd get here." Ella looked up at him, her eyes soft. "Neither did I," she replied with a small smile. "But I'm glad we did." Nathan smiled back, squeezing her hand. "Me too." For the first time in a long time, they both felt like they were exactly where they were supposed to be. Their journey wasn't over, not by a long shot. There would be bumps along the way, obstacles they would have to face, but they were no longer afraid of the unknown. They knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. No longer strangers, no longer bound by a contract, but two people who had built something real, a marriage founded not on duty, but on love. A love that had grown over time, in the most unexpected of ways. As they stood there, looking out over the park, they realized that the future was still uncertain. But for the first time, that didn't matter. What mattered was that they had each other, and together, they could handle anything life threw their way. And so, with a sense of calm certainty, they walked forward, together, into the future, ready for whatever came next.